Today we're going to be going over the Southeast Division in our season preview. So let's start with the Orlando Magic. It's tough to trust anybody on this Magic roster. You have Dwight Howard, who's usually a category killer in free throw percentage and turnovers. Rashard Lewis, who hasn't been the same since Turkoglu left. Vince Carter, who's playing on a bulky knee. And Jameer Nelson, who's had one All-Star season and several disappointing seasons. I would say Rashard Lewis is probably the best bet, since in the past he's usually produced about third round value, and this year he's going in the mid rounds, so if he gets back to form, he'll provide you some solid value for a sleeper pick. Finally, Dwight Howard is probably one of the funnest fantasy players to own if your league doesn't count free throw percentage, as he's more than capable of giving you 20 points, 20 rebounds, and 5 blocks on any given night, and completely carrying your team in rebounds and blocks, including field goal percentage. So if your league doesn't count free throw percentage, Dwight is definitely a usual suspect. Go. Dwight Howard is definitely somebody that needs to be avoided if your league does count free throw percentage. I recently wrote an article about how you can win a league with Dwight Howard, but unless you can get a specific combination of players to match up your roster with him, it's almost impossible to win a rotisserie league if you roster Dwight Howard. Consider this. Dwight Howard gets to the free throw line almost more than anybody in the NBA, and his attempts average out to about 3 average roster spots, and that simply kills your free throw category when it's all said and done. So unless you can match him up with the right combination of players, he has to be avoided if your league counts free throw percentage. Last year, Mikael Pietrus was stuck in a timeshare with Matt Barnes. They were both pretty much sharing minutes as small forward, and both put up reasonable numbers if you were in a deep league. This year, Matt Barnes is out of town, Pietrus is likely going to be the sixth man, and Orlando has a lot of injury-prone players at the wing spots with Vince Carter, Rashard Lewis, and such. If one of them were to go down, expect Pietrus to go up and take over a starting spot. If one of them goes down for a long time, Pietrus is going to be a serious fantasy player, considering his multi-cat potential and his defensive numbers that he's capable of putting up. JJ Redick tends to be the main sleeper around, because he's capable of hitting the three-point shot at a ridiculous pace, and I'm definitely fond of him. But in this case, I'm really looking forward to see what Pietrus can do with Barnes out of town. Don't sleep on Josh Smith this year. Last year, Josh Smith completely removed the three-point shot from his arsenal, and the end result was beautiful. He ended up shooting over 50% from the field for the first time in his career, let alone the fact that he's more than capable of being one of the only players in the league that can average you 2 steals and 2 blocks per game. And then you continue the fact that you have to add all of the multi-cat goodies that he can offer you, and Josh Smith is a surefire second rounder. Maybe even can sneak into the first round. Definitely don't sleep on it. I'm sure many of you have won a fantasy championship or two back in 2000, 2001, 2002 with Mike Bibby on your roster. Well, this year's version of Mike Bibby is virtually unownable. Considering the fact that he averaged single-digit points last season for the first time in his 13-year career, and literally a career low in almost every single statistical category, Mike Bibby needs to be avoided. With Jeff Teague waiting in the wings, fighting for the starting point guard spot, and Bibby another year older, I just don't see any way that his numbers will increase from last season, even though he was relatively healthy last year. Many people will likely be talking about Jamal Crawford and how he might light it up if Mike Bibby, loses a few minutes or two. But I'm here to talk to you about Jeff Teague, the lightning-fast point guard who completely exploded for Wake Forest 2 years ago, is prime breakout candidate who can take over the starting spot from Mike Bibby and throw up some excellent numbers. In 3 games where Teague started last season, he averaged 12.7 points, 3.3 rebounds, and 7.3 assists per game. The assist numbers may be a little high since he's not a traditional pass-first point guard, but the scoring numbers can easily be at the higher end of the scale. So with Bibby starting to become more of a role player, Teague can possibly break out more than anybody this year. First and foremost, let's raise a cheers to Miami Heat General Manager Pat Riley for orchestrating the impossible and bringing LeBron James and Chris Bosh to join forces with Dwayne Wade in Miami. Now, a lot of things change when you have this many superstars in the lineup. But one thing is for sure, LeBron could still be considered a #1 pick. Many experts believe he is. I personally don't. But LeBron is LeBron, and he can put up excellent numbers, is still young, and really, when you think about it logically, he's had a lot of mouths to feed in Cleveland in the past. There should be no different. He's not a selfish player, and his assist numbers should be huge. Wade can score with the best of them. I expect his points per game to drop a little bit, but he's still a usual suspect and still solid. Bosh will drop the most, but his defense numbers should go up now that he won't focus on offense as much. So all three are still fantasy superstars. They all might take a hit, but they're all still very much roster worthy. Lots of people may peg Chris Bosh in this category, which is avoid like the plague. And you know what? Rightfully so. His scoring numbers may drop now that his usage rate won't be as big as like it was in Toronto at least. But I'm not going to focus on him. I'm going to focus on the Miami point guards such as Mario Chalmers and Carlos Arroyo. Lots of people are going to be looking at these guys as deep value picks late in the drafts to garner a few more assists for their fantasy teams. Unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen, considering that LeBron and Wade are primed for the ball handling duties, will explode with passes and put up huge assist numbers. Even Miami Heat coach Eric Spoelstra mentioned that LeBron and Wade are both going to be playing the point guard a bit here and there. So you know what? Avoid the no-name point guards and focus on the superstars. It should be mentally impossible to find a sleeper sandwich between these three superstars. But you know what? It was fairly easy since they acquired Mike Miller, who will likely start or even come off as a six-man off the bench. Miller will likely be left open quite a bit with the big three on the court with him, especially from three-point land. He's a career 40.5% three-point shooter, and being left open is a dangerous thing. A player who has hit 202 three-pointers in a single season is even more dangerous. Don't be surprised if you see Mikey among the league leaders in the three-point category with some decent percentages and some solid assist numbers, as he's always been a great passer in the past. Steven Jackson and Gerald Wallace make up one of the most dynamic wing combos in the entire NBA. Both are solid defensively, perfect offensively, and put up overall crazy numbers. Gerald Wallace is the fantasy sweetheart here, considering he's more than capable of averaging over 1 steal and 1 block almost every single season, as he had in the past. Wallace is an anomaly and should be a fantasy force once again this season. Jackson should also be solid, but only grab him if he drops late in your draft, as his field goal percentage and turnovers can simply kill your team. For those of you following the international basketball scene this season, I know you've been keeping your eye on Boris Diaw playing for France. Well, he's always been a versatile player, gave you lots of rebounds, assists, and defensive stats from his position. But the point is, Boris Diaw showed up to camp this year extremely out of shape, with no stamina, no endurance, and a massive pot belly under his France jersey. He was always been deemed as a lazy player, so that's too much risk to take, and I think if you draft him, it's going to blow up in your face, just like his waistline blew up for France. Now back to some happier times. Raymond Felton, Charlotte's starting point guard for the last few years, was shipped out of town to New York, leaving them only with DJ Augustin and Sean Livingston as point guards. Both of these guys might end up being in a timeshare, but both of them have serious sleeper breakout potential, depending on who starts, of course. Now, everybody's money is on DJ Augustin, and I agree. He's a very athletic, speedy, small point guard who can fill up the score sheet very fast, can distribute the ball very well, and hit you tons of threes. But on the more feel-good story of the year, Sean Livingston is back. After being the promising rookie drafted for the LA Clippers, he had one of the most gruesome injuries you'll ever see in your life. Finally, he's back, And in 8 April games last year when he played for the Washington Wizards, he averaged 15.5 points and 8.3 assists while shooting over 60% and producing some solid complementary stats. So keep an eye on these two and see who breaks out with the starting position. My money's on Augustin, but Livingston really has some potential too. It feels pretty stupid to label these guys as usual suspects, but in this case, John Wall and Andre Blatche definitely fit the category. The Washington Wizards are in a really strong rebuilding phase. They got rid of all their veterans, and these two are going to be relied upon heavily. John Wall has been labeled the savior of the franchise since he was drafted first overall in the past draft, and he's going to get the ball in his hands quite a few times. Now, numbers-wise, I expect him to put up Derrick Rose-type rookie numbers with higher assists as he's more of a natural point guard, and likely small three-point numbers and field goal percentage, considering he hasn't really established his jump shot yet. Andre Blatche, on the other hand, finished last year strong, can put up solid scoring, rebound, and block numbers, and should be targeted heavily, and if you draft him, you really won't be disappointed. At this point, he might be a value pick because everybody might be avoiding him, but in my case, I'm going to label Gilbert Arenas in the void like the plague category. He hasn't had a healthy season since 2006. He's really a ticking time bomb out there. He can explode at any time. After being suspended last season over that whole gun fiasco, he's just a headache and not worth the risk. Let someone else deal with the problem. I know you might look like a genius if he stays healthy and blows up this season, but really, he's all over the place, and I would just avoid him like the plague, which is why he's in this category. Well, well, well. Look at the Washington Wizards front court. No more Eitan Thomas, no more Brendan Haywood, no more Anton Jameson. Hello, JaVale McGee. This guy is capable of leading the league in blocks, which is huge for you considering it's one of the hardest categories to get. Think about this. He averaged 1.7 blocks per game in just 16 minutes. That's ridiculous. You give that starter minutes of 32 and double that, that's 3.4 blocks a game, and that would lead the league. You want further proof, he averages 5 blocks a game when you average it out to 48 minutes per. That is higher than Dwight Howard, Samuel Dalembert, and all the elite shot blockers in the league. This kid has the longest arms I've ever seen and can easily carry your team in the blocks category if he's given the minutes. He's owned in about 87% of leagues now, so it's no secret. He is a sleeper. Get him on the board and draft him.